Imagine looking down at your watch.
Yeah.
You see the second-hand tick, and suddenly you realize that the 60-second minute isn't just like some random measurement we all agreed on.
Right, it's actually an echo.
Exactly, a mathematical echo of an ancient pre-flood civilization. And not just any civilization, but one that ancient texts claim was run by literal demons.
Which is just a wild concept to wrap your head around.
It completely shifts your paradigm, right? I mean, you are the kind of person who hunts for that exact feeling, that rush of seeing the familiar world through a completely unexpected lens. Well, the mission of today's deep dive is tailored entirely for you.
Oh, absolutely. It's a heavy one today.
It really is. We are going to unpack the bizarre, highly secretive history of biblical giants, advanced pre-flood civilizations, and the startling ways that a deeply ancient spiritual worldview translates directly into the apps on your phone and our modern, supposedly secular society.
Yeah, we're covering a lot of ground.
We really are. We're drawing from a fascinating compilation of research covering Genesis 6, ancient Near Eastern history, theology, and archaeology. And to help synthesize this incredibly dense material, I'm joined by our resident expert.
It is great to be here. And I should set the expectations right up front, you know. What we are exploring today is not some dusty recounting of mythological history.
Definitely not.
No, we are fundamentally rethinking how humanity interacts with the unseen world.
Right.
Once you grasp the mechanics of what these ancient cultures believed they were doing, it completely reorients how you view everything from ancient ruins to global economics.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to even step foot into this ancient world, we first have to, violently strip away our modern fairy tale conceptions of giants.
Right, the whole beanstalk thing.
Exactly. When most of us hear that word, we immediately picture a towering 50-foot monster stomping around a beanstalk going fee-fi-fo-fum. But if you look at the historical context, that is a complete mistranslation of the concept.
It is entirely a modern projection. To understand the reality, we have to trace the etymology of the word Nephilim, which is the specific term used in the Genesis text.
And that comes from Hebrew, right?
Yeah, it's rooted in ancient Aramaic and Hebrew. But when those texts were translated into the Greek Old Testament, the scholars used the word gigantes.
Ah, which sounds like giant.
Exactly, which is eventually where we derive our English word giant. But in the ancient Near Eastern context, gigantes, or giant, did not mean an absurdly tall, lumbering creature. It was a behavioral characterization.
Like a personality trait.
Pretty much. It meant a thug, a bully, an authoritarian tyrant who ruled by sheer force.
I want to use an analogy from the research that perfectly grounds this because it helps us step out of the mythological mindset. Think back to the late 1980s.
Oh, yeah.
When the U.S. government went after Manuel Noriega, the media constantly referred to him as the Panamanian strongman.
Right, I remember that.
Now, they weren't calling him a strongman because he was 8 feet tall and had a phenomenal bench press.
No.
He was a strongman because he was a ruthless, authoritarian dictator who crushed his opposition.
That makes perfect sense.
So it really makes you wonder, were these ancient Nephilim essentially just ancient mob bosses and warlords?
Precisely. Their outsized dominance, their brutality, their ability to hoard resources and violently oppress others, that is what made them giants in the eyes of the ancient world.
Wow.
And this brings us to the setting where these figures supposedly ruled, which is the pre-flood civilization.
Right, the flood.
Yeah. Geologically speaking, around 10,000 years ago, corresponding with the end of the last ice age and massive glacial melting, there was catastrophic rise in global sea levels. We actually have physical evidence of this.
Like the Black Sea stuff?
Yes, the remnants of submerged ancient villages sitting at the bottom of the Black Sea. But what is truly captivating is how drastically different cultures interpreted the memory of that era.
The divergence in the historical spin is just wild. I mean, you could ask anyone from ancient Greece to Mesopotamia, and there was a universal consensus that a highly advanced civilization existed before the waters rose.
Universally accepted, yeah.
But the pagan cultures viewed this era as a lost golden age, a time of high technology and magic, which they considered two sides of the same coin, honestly. They looked back at it with a profound sense of tragic loss.
Right, a golden era.
But the biblical text in Genesis looks at the exact same time period and casts it as an age of unimaginable wickedness, chaos, and tyranny spearheaded by the Nephilim.
The contrast is stark, and you actually see these competing narratives encoded directly into their historical mathematics, which is wild.
The math part blew my mind.
Yeah, so the ancient Babylonians, for instance, operated on base 60 mathematics. That highly advanced system is the exact reason you and I still divide our hours into 60 minutes and our minutes into 60 seconds today.
Which means we are quite literally organizing our modern days using Babylonian timekeeping.
We are. And when you look at ancient documents like the Sumerian kings list, you see pre-flood rulers supposedly living for tens of thousands of years.
Which obviously sounds impossible.
Right, but historians recognize that these numbers were likely coded using that base 60 math to signify technological or astronomical milestones rather than literal lifespans.
Oh, interesting.
And Genesis encodes its numbers as well, though with a completely different theological purpose. Take the figure of Enoch, for example.
Okay.
He is listed as the 7th generation from Adam, and the text specifically notes that he lived for 365 years.
365 years, the exact number of days in the solar calendar.
Exactly. And if you cross-reference that with the Sumerian kings list, it is specifically the 7th pre-flood king who is credited with introducing the solar calendar to humanity.
That cannot be a coincidence.
No. Across these warring cultural narratives, you have a deeply encoded shared memory of a specific time when profound paradigm-shifting knowledge was introduced to humanity.
But that creates a massive logical problem for us today, right? If this pre-flood world possessed such incredibly advanced mathematics and astronomical knowledge, where did it come from?
That is the big question.
Because the modern assumption is that human progress is just a slow, steady march of guys tinkering with rocks until they invent the wheel, and then tinkering with wheels until they invent the rover.
Right, a linear progression.
But the ancients didn't believe that at all. To understand their explanation, you have to look at how they viewed the human mind.
What's fascinating here is the ancient Greek concept of the mind, which they called the nous. Today, we heavily rely on the metaphor of a computer.
Sure, like processing data.
Exactly. We think of our brains as hard drives that generate original thoughts and process data internally. The ancients completely rejected that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they viewed the mind as a sensory organ. They literally referred to it as the eye of the heart.
I want to modernize this because it is such a crucial concept. It's like viewing the human mind as a smartphone antenna.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Your phone downloads music from the cloud, and the internal hardware processes that data so you can hear a song. But the physical phone itself didn't write the music, and it didn't broadcast the signal. It merely received it.
That's a great way to put it.
The ancients believed our thoughts, our sudden inspirations, and our desires are often received from an outside spiritual realm, the exact same way our physical eyes passively receive light from a sunset.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. You are tuning into a frequency. And according to this ancient worldview, all major leaps in human technology, metallurgy for forging advanced weaponry, the mathematics for complex calendars, the use of root manipulation in pharmacology, these weren't just discovered through trial and error.
They were downloads.
Exactly. They were signals transmitted or actively revealed by spiritual entities. But the historical text insists there was a devastating catch.
There's always a catch.
Always. These spirits handed this immense power to humanity long before we were mature enough to handle it.
It's giving a loaded gun to a toddler.
It is the ultimate tragedy of premature power. Look at the narrative of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In the theological context of the time, the tree itself wasn't evil or toxic.
Right.
Humanity was created innocent in a childlike state. The design was for humanity to grow, gain wisdom, and eventually mature to a point where they could rightly handle the knowledge of good and evil.
So it wasn't about keeping them dumb.
No, not at all. The sin wasn't the existence of the knowledge. The sin was humanity aggressively grasping at a mature power they hadn't earned, prompted by a deceptive spirit.
The research highlights a terrifying modern parallel to this that really makes the ancient warning resonate: the development of nuclear technology.
Oh, absolutely.
The atomic bomb was this sudden, massive leap in godlike knowledge handed to mankind. And instead of humanity pausing to use nuclear physics purely for, like, carbon-neutral energy or space exploration, we immediately used it to construct a weapon capable of vaporizing cities.
Within just a few years.
Yeah, and there is a deeply sobering, often overlooked historical detail about how that power was first wielded. The atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, which historically was the epicenter of Christianity in Japan.
Wow.
It was the most heavily Christian city in the nation. The tragic irony there is profound. Humanity unlocked this cosmic foundational power of the universe, and the immediate result was the obliteration of a spiritual center.
It proves the ancient thesis, really.
Power without spiritual maturity inevitably destroys the very things it is supposed to protect.
That historical irony perfectly encapsulates the pattern. The promise of secret, advanced knowledge is always framed by these spiritual entities as a pathway to control, security, or divine status.
Right.
But because the human vessel lacks the moral framework to contain it, that same knowledge invariably becomes an instrument of self-destruction.
Wait, I have to stop you there and push back on the logistics of this. Downloading technological blueprints into a receptive human mind is one thing, but Genesis 6 goes way beyond mental influence.
It definitely gets more physical.
Yeah, it describes physical reproduction. It talks about spirits and humans breeding.
It does. The Genesis text describes entities called the sons of God. Now, to an ancient reader, these were not human royalty or righteous men. They were understood as vast cosmic intelligences or angelic beings who rebelled.
Okay.
The text states they materialized, mated with human women, and produced the Nephilim.
And once again, the pagan cultures and the biblical texts look at the exact same event and draw completely opposite conclusions.
Like two sides of a coin.
Exactly. Take the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, one of the oldest surviving pieces of epic literature from ancient Mesopotamia. In their culture, Gilgamesh is a hero. The text proudly celebrates him as being two-thirds divine and one-third human, a literal demigod.
Right.
Interestingly, Gilgamesh's name actually appears in the Book of Giants, which was a text discovered thousands of years later among the Dead Sea Scrolls. So the cultural memory is incredibly persistent.
It really stuck around.
But the biblical narrative looks at that exact same two-thirds divine genetic math and says, no, these rulers aren't glorious demigods. They are two-thirds demon, and they are an abomination.
The biblical authors deliberately stripped the glory away from these tyrants. But to understand how this physical reproduction supposedly worked, we have to look at the highly specific rituals of the ancient world.
Okay, let's get into the rituals.
Let's examine the historical figure of Og, the king of Bashan. The biblical text identifies him as the last of the Rephaim.
Who were they again?
The Rephaim were essentially ancient Canaanite warrior cults, famous for their brutal military dominance and ancestor worship. Now, the text seemingly drops a random piece of trivia about Og, detailing the exact massive dimensions of his iron bed.
Why his bed?
Well, modern archaeological context reveals this isn't trivia at all.
No, the measurements are a massive red flag. The dimensions of King Og's iron bed perfectly match the dimensions of a ceremonial bed found at the top of the Etemenanke.
Yeah.
And for those listening, the Etemenanke was the towering, massive ziggurat in the center of Babylon, which many historians believe was the historical basis for the Tower of Babel.
Exactly. This bed wasn't for sleeping, it was the focal point of a vital state ritual. During the New Year festival, the standing king would enter the top of the ziggurat and engage in a sexual ritual with a high priestess or shrine prostitute.
Okay, but where does the spirit come in?
The crucial element is that this woman was believed to be ritually possessed by a patron deity or spirit at that exact moment. Therefore, the resulting child wasn't just human.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they believed the child had three parents: the physical king, the physical woman, and the spirit possessing her. This was the mechanical process through which they believed they were infusing the spiritual realm into human genetics to breed the next generation of divine rulers.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit unsettling. It would be incredibly easy to dismiss this as just one isolated, bizarre cult practice localized to Babylon.
Right, just a weird historical footnote.
But the historical record shows an astonishing persistence of this exact ritual framework across the globe. You see architectural and cultural echoes of this three-parent spiritual mating in the ancient Khmer Empire in Cambodia, particularly around the structures of Angkor Wat.
Thousands of miles away.
Yes, and the practice persisted well into the modern era in Japan. Up until the end of World War II, part of the coronation ritual for Japanese emperors involved ceremonially spending the night with the sun goddess, Amaterasu.
That's fascinating.
Emperor Hirohito was the last to participate in this before the sexual element was reportedly removed during the post-war restructuring.
Yeah.
So, logically, I have to ask, how is it mathematically possible that totally disparate, unconnected cultures, separated by oceans and thousands of years, from the Middle East to the jungles of Southeast Asia to an island nation like Japan, could spontaneously invent the exact same, highly specific, three-parent spiritual breeding ritual?
It begs the question.
Doesn't that imply there's a shared, underlying spiritual reality driving human behavior?
That is the pivotal question of human anthropology. If religion were purely a human invention, a sociological coping mechanism, you would expect a vast, chaotic diversity of religious structures based on local geography.
Right. Totally random.
But instead, we see a terrifying repetition of core themes: spiritual mating, human sacrifice, and blood rituals. To understand why, we have to clearly define what a spirit actually is in this context.
It's not a ghost.
No, we aren't talking about a translucent ghost rattling chains in a hallway. A spirit is better understood as a collective consciousness that functions at a level above the individual human.
I love the biological analogy used in the research to explain this because it brings it right down to physical reality. Think about the human gut microbiome.
Oh, this is a great analogy.
Right now, inside your digestive system, millions of bacteria are chemically communicating with each other. Individually, they're just single cells, but collectively, they form a lower-level consciousness that regulates your mood, digests your food, and keeps your body alive. The ancient understanding of spiritual forces is just taking that biological concept and shifting it one level up. When humans gather together, align their desires, and act in unified ways, they give physical form to a higher-level spiritual consciousness.
Yes. Humans are the physical hardware that these spherical software programs run on. We participate in them. But here is the dark reality of the ancient world.
It gets darker.
Yeah. To sustain the power and presence of these dark ruling spirits, the ongoing ritual life required terrible fuel. Specifically, it required human sacrifice and cannibalism.
Wow.
Blood was the central currency. And if you look at history, the elites who align themselves with these power structures have always maintained a dark, esoteric obsession with blood, reproduction, and genetics. It is a recurring pattern of utilizing vulnerable human life to consolidate power.
And we still see echoes of this.
You can see the modern echoes of these esoteric fixations on genetics, breeding, and blackmail in the elite circles of today. The details surrounding the Epstein network, for example, reveal a very similar, deeply disturbing obsession with human commodification and genetic control.
Which really shatters the illusion that we are just studying ancient history. We tell ourselves that we live in a highly enlightened, secular society that has outgrown all this spiritual superstition.
We like to think so.
But the research argues that we haven't abandoned religion at all. We have just successfully rebranded it. Look at the way modern society talks about the economy. We capitalize it. We treat it exactly the way the ancients treated a patron god.
That's so true.
We watch the ticker tape like priests reading entrails. We say the economy is angry. We say the economy favors one sector over another. We literally say that we must make sacrifices, whether through mass layoffs or structural poverty, to appease the economy and restore prosperity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the writings of St. Augustine in the early 5th century.
Okay, bringing in Augustine.
In his monumental work, City of God, Augustine popularized the concept of the saeculum, which is the root of our word secular. Augustine used saeculum to describe the endless, shifting, earthly cycle of time, empires rising and falling, markets crashing, the relentless daily churn of the news.
Just the grind of history.
Exactly. What is so profound about our current moment is that even our modern religious institutions have largely been subsumed by the saeculum. You look at modern prosperity gospels, and they have entirely abandoned the ancient goal of internal spiritual transformation.
It's all about the here and now.
Right. Instead, they focus purely on earthly wealth, political dominance, and winning the current news cycle. Faith has been reduced to a utilitarian tool to conquer the saeculum.
But I want to nail this down. Are we literally practicing paganism when we obsess over GDP in the stock market? Or is this just a really poetic academic metaphor for human greed?
It's a fair question.
Because if it is literal, that means we've created a covert religion that still demands human sacrifice, perhaps through endless proxy wars or grinding industrial exploitation, just to keep our modern gods happy.
The ancient theological perspective argues it is entirely literal. You are always participating in a collective spirit. The only variable is which one you are feeding.
Wow.
This naturally leads us to the mechanics of possession. How do these negative spiritual forces actually take root in an individual life? And more importantly, how does someone break free?
Yeah, what's the mechanism?
Ancient theologians mapped out the progressive nature of sin, and it aligns perfectly with our earlier analogy of the mind receiving signals like an antenna.
It is a terrifyingly logical stepping stone process. First, a thought enters your mind from the outside. A sudden urge or a dark impulse. At that stage, it isn't a sin. You can't control what frequency hits your antenna.
Right, you're just receiving.
But then you entertain it.
Yeah.
You dwell on it. That thought hardens into a deliberate plan. The plan turns into a physical action. You repeat the action till it becomes a deeply ingrained habit.
And that's where it traps you.
And eventually, that habit takes the wheel. The urge is now driving the bus. Ancient writers describe this final stage as a form of possession. Ultimately, if you align yourself with that destructive frequency long enough, it leads to an actual metaphysical transformation.
It literally changes who you are.
St. John Chrysostom, a prominent early church father, famously warned that it isn't people who die violent deaths who become demons, it is people who live like demons who eventually become them.
It is a trajectory of self-destruction, and it is particularly devastating when we apply it to the modern crisis of digital isolation. The research highlights a horrifying statistic.
Yeah, this part was tough to read.
The average age of initial exposure to hardcore internet pornography in the United States is currently 8 years old.
8.
When a child's developing neural pathways are flooded with that level of intense, distorted stimuli at such a vulnerable age, it completely rewires their sexuality and identity. It violently separates the concept of physical intimacy from genuine human connection, substituting it with a dark digital void.
So what does this all mean for us today? If we are constantly swimming in these unseen spiritual forces, and our literal hardware, our minds are being bombarded and rewired by digital distortion from childhood, how do we actually break free?
We need a countermeasure.
The ancient solution is radically different from what most people picture when they think of a modern religious service. The ancient view is that the church was never supposed to be a courtroom. It was designed to be a hospital.
That distinction changes everything. A courtroom is obsessed with litigating the past, establishing guilt, and handing down punishment.
Right, who's right and who's wrong?
Exactly. But a hospital doesn't care how you broke your leg. It is solely focused on triage, stabilizing the wound, and healing the patient. The primary ancient mechanism for this spiritual healing was confession.
Not just in your head, though.
No, not just a private internal thought, but physically confessing your darkest, most shameful secrets to a spiritual father within a tangible, accountable community.
It's fascinating because on the surface, that sounds exactly like modern psychological therapy. But why would a purely secular clinical approach fall short here?
Because of the root cause.
Right. The argument is that if the root of the problem is an actual metaphysical, spiritual infection, just talking about your feelings isn't enough. You need the physical community to shatter the isolating illusion that you are uniquely broken.
Yes.
You have to step out of the digital void, sit in a room, and look real people in the eye to realize that everyone else is fighting a similar spiritual battle.
Exactly. True healing requires submission to a reality larger than your own ego, and this brings clarity to one of the most misunderstood theological concepts in history: the unforgivable sin, or the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit.
Yes. This has paralyzed people for centuries. What is the one thing that God absolutely refuses to forgive?
The unforgivable sin isn't a specific, terrible crime you commit in a moment of weakness. It is an entrenched posture of the heart. In the biblical narrative, Christ is physically healing people, and the religious leaders look directly at this miraculous restorative healing and declare that he is using demonic power to achieve it.
They called good evil.
They looked at the Spirit of God and called it a demon. Therefore, the unforgivable sin simply means seeing the active healing power of God and labeling it evil. You cannot be forgiven if you actively identify the only medicine capable of curing you as a poison and fundamentally refuse to take it. By definition, you choose to remain unhealed.
Wow, that makes so much sense.
This raises an important question about how we orient our lives. There's a profound quote from Abraham Lincoln during the absolute darkest days of the American Civil War. A reporter asked Lincoln if he believed God was on the side of the Union.
Everyone wants God on their side.
Exactly. But Lincoln replied that his primary concern wasn't whether God was on our side, but rather whether we were on God's side.
That completely flips the script on modern religion. We so often treat God like a cosmic vending machine or a magic spell, trying to force divine approval for whatever political or economic goal we've already decided we want.
Right. Treating God like a tool.
But the true spiritual posture is stepping back, asking what the divine is already doing to heal the world, and figuring out how to humbly participate in that reality.
That's the core of it all.
This has been an absolutely mind-bending deep dive. We have journeyed from the mistranslated history of ancient giants, to the ritual beds of Babylonian ziggurats, to the tragic skies over Nagasaki, right down to the isolating glow of the apps on your smartphone.
It's all connected.
The central, undeniable takeaway from all of this research is that humanity is never operating in a vacuum. You are always inevitably participating in a consciousness larger than yourself. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you step back out into the world. We established that the ancients believed the human mind acts as an antenna, and they actively built massive physical temples and ziggurats with the explicit purpose of inviting powerful spirits to come down and interface with humanity.
That was their whole goal.
If that is true, what kind of unseen temples are we inadvertently building right now in our digital age? Through our hyper-tuned algorithms, our endless hours of screen time, and our deep technologically induced isolation, are we simply building the perfect, frictionless infrastructure for the modern Nephilim to walk right in and take control?
It's a chilling thought.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, and we will see you next time.